So what does it really take to become a groundbreaking scientist? Is it just raw talent, being born a genius, or is there something more to it? Well, today we're going to dive into the story of Richard H. Ebright. He's a scientist whose amazing career didn't start in some fancy high-tech lab. Nope, it all started with a simple childhood hobby. And his story? Well, it's a perfect example of how the biggest, most important discoveries can come from the tiniest little sparks of curiosity.
Okay, let's just jump right in with a fact that is, honestly, it's pretty mind-blowing. At just 22 years old, 22, while he was still in college, Richard Ebright co-wrote a paper that laid out a whole new theory on how cells work. And we're not talking about some small-time journal here. This thing got published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. I mean, for a student, it's like a rookie baseball player stepping up to the plate in the World Series and hitting a grand slam on his very first swing. It just doesn't happen.
And you know what? That incredible start, it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't just some flash in the pan. Just look at his career today. Dr. Ebright is a top professor at Rutgers University. He's won all sorts of major awards and fellowships. But it's so fascinating to think that this whole amazing career was really built on the foundation of what he figured out when he was just a kid in college.
So that's the big question, right? How does a person do so much so young? What's the secret recipe? To really get it, we've got to go back, way back to the very beginning of his story. Believe it or not, this whole incredible scientific journey, it all started with butterflies. Yep, butterflies. See, Ebright was an only child growing up in Pennsylvania, so he really had to make his own fun. And for him, that meant exploring the world around him, right there in his backyard. He just had this unstoppable curiosity. And I mean, from the very beginning, his curiosity was just off the charts. We're talking as early as kindergarten, he started collecting, well, everything. He collected butterflies, of course, but also rocks, fossils, coins, you name it, he was probably collecting it. He even got super into astronomy, spending his nights just staring up at the stars. It all came down to this really simple but really powerful drive. He just wanted to understand how things worked.
Now, behind this incredible curiosity, there was a really important person fueling it all, his mom. She saw that he had this bright, inquisitive mind, and she basically made it her mission to help him explore it. She wasn't just giving him chores to do, she was finding ways for him to learn. She got him microscopes, telescopes, all kinds of books, and most importantly, she was always there encouraging him. And then came this one moment that really changed everything. It's when his butterfly collecting hobby went from just being a hobby to something way, way more serious. And this huge shift, it was all sparked by one simple gift from his mom. So this is the book. And it's such a perfect example of how something as simple as a children's book can open up the entire world of science. The book was called The Travels of Monarch X. And it wasn't just a story, it was an invitation. It basically said, hey, you can help us study butterflies by tagging them. So he wasn't just reading about science anymore, he was doing it. For young Ebright, this was a total game changer. The door to real science just swung wide open. But, the path to making big discoveries is never a straight line, right? There are always bumps in the road. And for Ebright, one of his most important lessons actually came from a failure, a really big one back in 7th grade that taught him way more than any prize ever could have. So he enters his first county science fair, and he's got this project he thinks is a sure winner, a super neat display of frog tissue slides you could look at under a microscope. And he lost, didn't even get an honorable mention. And he was wondering why, right? So he looks around and he realizes all the kids who won, they had all done actual experiments. And that's when the light bulb went off for him. He understood real science isn't just showing off something cool. It's about asking a question and then trying to figure out the answer. Okay, so now he gets it. Armed with this new understanding of what real science is, Ebright comes back to the science fair year after year, and his projects just get better and better. They get more and more advanced until finally, he's investigating the code of life itself. And this path would lead him to the breakthrough that basically launched his entire career. All right, before we get to his big discovery, let's do a super quick refresher on what he was looking at. DNA. You probably know this, but just think of it as the master blueprint for all life, right? It's got all the instructions for building and running an organism. And for a very long time, the huge mystery for scientists was, how in the world do our cells actually read that blueprint? And this is where it all comes together. It's so cool. It started with a question that came straight from his butterfly hobby. He was looking at a monarch pupa and wondered, what are these 12 little gold spots for?
Just that one simple question led him and his college roommate to develop a completely new theory about how cells read their DNA. They even built a model out of plastic to show exactly how they thought it worked.
And that theory, the one that started with a kid wondering about some little gold spots on a butterfly, was so important, so revolutionary, that it got published in that major scientific journal we talked about at the beginning. He did it. He connected his childhood passion for butterflies to one of the biggest, most fundamental questions in all of biology. Just incredible.
So, when you look at his whole journey, what can we take away from it? What are the ingredients that go into making a scientist like him? Well, his story actually gives us a pretty clear blueprint.
It really boils down to these 4 things. First, yeah, he obviously had a first-rate mind, no question. But that's not enough. He also had that deep, driving curiosity, the same thing that made him collect all those rocks and butterflies as a kid. Then there's perseverance. He didn't give up after that science fair failure. He learned from it and came back stronger. And finally, he had that will to win. And not just to beat other people, but a real drive to be the best and to actually contribute something important.
So in the end, I think what his story really shows us is that having a brilliant mind is great. It's a fantastic start, but it's not the whole picture, not even close. Real scientific achievement comes from putting all those pieces together: the intelligence, the curiosity, the perseverance, and that unstoppable drive to figure things out.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. What's the real spark of discovery? Is it that initial curiosity that makes us ask why? Or is it the hard work, the grit, and determination it takes to actually find the answer? I think Richard Ebright's story tells us you can't have one without the other. They're both absolutely essential, kind of wound together in the DNA of every great scientist. Thanks so much for joining me for this one.